Hello, Smite fans! It is that time again where we're moving into a new split of the SPL, which is an exciting time for all of us who are really into competitive Smite. And though at the time of recording this video, the in-game voting for your teams isn't up yet, thought I'd give you a rundown of what's going to happen in this first week and how I think things are likely to shake out, so hopefully you can pick up some extra FP in case you're not quite sure how things are looking at this point. So, starting on Thursday, we're going to be in North America. The first matchup is Envious versus Randazzos. Envious has gone through some pretty heavy roster changes recently, and Randazzos has gone through some as well. Both of these teams were in the relegations. Envious had a disastrous last split, but both of these teams were in the relegations and both made it back out of the relegations, so good for them. But based on the performances we saw in the relegations, I think this one is going to go 2-0 to Envious. Even with all the roster changes and stuff they've had, Cyclone was pretty dominant, along with Kiki, those two sort of core members that remain of Envious. Both superstar players, both really strong, so I think that one's probably going to go 2-0 Envious. Next matchup is Team Allegiance versus Nile. This could be an interesting one. Team Allegiance, much like Envious, has gone through major roster changes. We had the rather sad news that Lasses and Maddie Pocket are both leaving competitive Smite, so that's a bit of a shame for some of us NA Smite fans, but their new lineup is looking pretty solid. Inside sources say that their scrims are going well, and we'll see how this shakes out. I think this one's likely to be a split. The Nile's pretty solid middle of the team, or middle of the pack team, but Allegiance's new roster definitely could bring some surprises. And in general, my philosophy as we go down this is going to be that closely matched NA teams I think are likely to split, whereas closely matched EU teams I think are still likely to go 2-0 to the slightly better team. Just a difference that I noticed in the overall stability between NA and EU. Moving on is Luminosity versus Soar. If you had asked me about this game before the Panthera Invitational, I probably would have said this was going to be a 2-0 for Soar. However, Soar looked quite vulnerable at the Panthera Invitational rather. So I think there's a good chance Luminosity will take a game off of them, and this is likely going to be a split series. Next up is Eager versus Enemy. If you'd asked me about this one before the Panthera Invitational, I would have said this was going to be a split. However, Enemy pushed Panthera all the way out to 5 games. Looked super solid at the Invitational, and I definitely think they are probably the strongest team in NA right now. Definitely, probably. Let me rephrase that. They are definitely the strongest team in NA right now. So they are definitely going to take 2 over Eager, in my opinion. Moving on to Friday over in Europe. Europe, we had exactly the opposite result from relegations, and I think it's the first time it's happened. Both SPL teams were knocked out and replaced by Challenger Cup teams. That was pretty interesting. This first matchup is going to be Challenger versus Challenger, and I think your best bet on this one is likely to go split. There didn't seem to be one clear favorite in the relegations from what I saw, so I think this could go either way. Moving on, Dignitas versus Leftovers. As I said earlier, I think EU will tend towards 2-0s more than NA, even if the teams are fairly closely matched, and neither of these teams have undergone major roster changes. Not many of the EU teams have at all. So we're just going to look at where they ended up in the last season, and Dignitas did finish slightly higher than Leftovers, so we're going to go 2-0 Dignitas on this. Cringe Crew versus Hungry for More, super similar situation. No major roster changes. Hungry for More looked a bit stronger in the last split, so we're going to go 2-0 there. Paradigm versus Panthera. This is another one that probably could have gone either way before the Panthera Invitational. However, Paradigm looked pretty vulnerable at the Panthera Invitational, much like Soar. Panthera had a really rough time with Enemy, but Enemy had really no trouble with Paradigm, so if Panthera can beat Enemy, I think they'll probably 2-0 Paradigm. Moving on to Saturday, remaining over in Europe. These ones are a little more clear-cut through this day other than the last matchup. Hungry for More versus Fantastique. Again, Fantastique and Cyclone GG are both Challenger Cup teams, and though they were good enough to work their way into the SPL for this split, they're still relatively new teams, don't have that big SPL experience like some of these other guys do. This one's going to be a pretty clear-cut 2-0 for Hungry for More, in my opinion. Panthera versus Dignitas. Again, Panthera was able to beat Enemy, and Enemy looked crazy at the Panthera Invitational, so I don't think they'll have any trouble 2-0ing Dignitas. Paradigm versus Cyclone GG, same thing as this first matchup. Paradigm, SPL experience, top 2 team in Europe, they're probably going to wipe the floor with Cyclone GG. This final matchup, Cringe Crew versus Leftovers. These two teams performed both pretty admirably in the previous split, but Cringe Crew did have the edge by about 6 games. So we're going to give this one 2-0 to Cringe Crew over Leftovers, following our idea of EU being more likely to 2-0. On Sunday, we move back over to NA, and the first match is going to be Soar G2A versus Envious, where, as I said earlier, I think Envious' star players will be able to sort of mop up Randazzos. I don't think they're going to have that kind of luck with Soar. I'm going to go 2-0 over Envious on this one. Soar, even though they look vulnerable at the Invitational, still a solid lineup, and Team Envious is going through all that roster rebuilding stage right now. Enemy versus the Nile, I think this is going to be a pretty clear 2-0 for Enemy. Again, they looked crazy at the Panthera Invitational, and I think they're probably going to be the first seed in NA. This split, I don't think there's anybody who's really going to challenge them, unless something majorly weird happened. Next one, Eager versus Randazzos. Eager top 2 or 3 team, tied for the top 2 there. I think they're probably going to 2-0 over Randazzos here. Randazzos, they hang in there, they always make it back into the SPL, but they're just really struggling to find any footing in the upper echelons, so I think they're probably going to remain near the bottom this split as well, unless something major happens. So 2-0 Eager over Randazzos. Final matchup, Allegiance versus Luminosity. Even though it sounds like things are going well for the roster rebuilding in Allegiance, I doubt they're going to be quite up to the same level for this first week. So with Luminosity's core stable players remaining on the team, I think we're going to have to go 2-0 Luminosity on this matchup as well. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of how you might be able to get some FP this first week. Hopefully you're all excited for the split. If you liked the video and found it informative, be sure to give a thumbs up. If you want to see more, subscribe. I'll be doing a lot of coverage of this SPL split. I'm super excited to see how all these new rosters work out, and I will talk to you guys later.